let's get started. I'm Professor Francis Fiske, and I'm here to help you understand more about how to develop in JavaScript, how JavaScript can work for you to manipulate the document object model. So before we get started, or as we get started, I want to actually take the time to explain what the document object model is. So the document object model, as you can see, I have my browser up, is the actual framework or the fabric which connects web pages to the scripts or programming languages that are within the web page by representing the structure of a document. Such as in this case, we can see that HTML is representing the actual web page as it is represented in memory. And normally when we refer to the document object model, we're talking about a scripting language of some sort that manipulates the HTML and or CSS to make the page do things that it would otherwise not be able to do with just HTML. And when we say this, we're referring to scripting languages that are browser specific, languages like JavaScript and or TypeScript. In certain respects, I guess you can make PHP and Python also put those also in that category. But in most situations, JavaScript it has a larger market share than those other languages do. Now, the DOM is represented by a logical tree, and that logical tree has branches that end with a node, and each node contains the objects we need to do the things that we need it to do. Now, in most respects, the document object model can be rather verbose. There's a lot in it, but there's really only 5 components that we truly care about. When we're talking about the document object model, we care about things like the web page that we're using, the browser-specific web page, if I'm being more specific. Whether we're using Internet Explorer, or Edge, or Chrome, or Firefox, or any of the plethora of other web pages, browsers that are available to us. You might want to see that actual document's history and the way that it operates. You might want to be able to see the cookies. In certain respects, these specific parts of the document exist within the document in such a way as to give us a means to manipulate the HTML and or see what is going on within our web page. So just to give you some context, and I don't want to go too deep into this because in this specific course, we will manipulate the document object model, but more specifically, we will be manipulating our HTML. That part of the document doesn't necessarily exist, or it doesn't necessarily exist deep within the document object model. We can manipulate our HTML more inherently at a higher level. But with this being said, let's talk about a big part of the document object model that we as developers manipulate quite a lot. And that is when we look at the actual document itself. The document itself contains a lot of things. And if you want to follow along, you can follow along as well in our document our Mozilla developer reference. And this is what I'm using to kind of help me give you the nuts and bolts of what matters to us. So, if I wanted at a very high level, and if you've ever used jQuery or any other of the frameworks or libraries available to you, you know that this is a lot simpler in those languages. But if I just wanted to see what was in the document body, or I wanted to manipulate the document body, I can say document body, document.body. It doesn't have to be higher, uppercase, I apologize. And if I want to see what's inside it, I can actually say alert. So now there's 2 different ways that we can look at something in JavaScript. We can use console.log, or we can use alert. In this case, I'm using alert. And what will happen is it'll tell me what's in the body. Obviously, it can't tell me what's inside the object. Just to give you some context, when we ask any programming language for a specific object, we're asking that programming language for the object itself, not for what's inside it. If I wanted to see what was inside this object, what I would need to do is iterate over it using a for each loop or a for loop. And we're going to speak about those things later on in this section or in this course, but not now. So I'm not going to try to unravel what's in this. But if I wanted to see what was inside it and not necessarily have to unravel it, I couldn't do that. But document.body would actually tell me what's in the body. In this case, hello world, and then the script.js. There's something else that we can look at. Let's say I wanted to see what cookies we had. I can say document.cookie. Now, document.cookie allows me to see what cookies are stored in this specific web session. Now, I don't think I have a whole lot, so it's not going to show me anything. As you can see, the content would show up underneath this, REPL.co says. REPL.co is not going to tell me what cookies are in this page because there are no cookies in this page. We haven't saved any. Normally, if you want to see a cookie, you have to save the cookie, but in that respect, there are none. If I wanted to see the fonts that are displayed in this specific document, which I once again don't think there are many, I can say that. Once again, font face is an object. So in order to see that font face, I would need to iterate over the object to get the properties of the objects that are there. Or I could try to force something out of it. So if I said document.fonts dot, it should be able to tell me, let's see if I can find keys. Values. So .values.keys. Once again, objects are a high-level way of explaining programming, but an object is a variable that contains multiple data sets inside of it, and those data sets are comprised of key value pairs. The key being the name that I want to associate with the value. So in this case, when I say values, the value is the value. I don't really have another name for that, but it is what that key represents. For instance, if I had a object called car, and in that object I had certain keys, make, model, year, those are the keys that then I would apply values to. So the make, let's just keep it simple, Chevy, the model, Silverado, year 2023, right? And when I said values, I wouldn't get the keys. I wouldn't get make, model, I wouldn't get those actual names. I would get the values that are associated to those names. Chevy, Silverado, 2023. So in this case, I don't really want to see the key of the font. I want to see the value that exists there. Click run. Once again, it tells me, hey bud, you have to run something else to get that out of me. This is basically just a function, so no harm, no foul. But as you can see, the document contains a lot of data that we would be able to ascertain and pull out. I'm wondering if I would be able to, let me see if I can force this to do something different. Is it going to let me back out? Yes. Will this let me in? No. This isn't going to show me what I want to see. But if I showed you what the back end of this page looked like, in this case, I'm looking specifically at the sources and the code that exists behind this entire page, right? Now, in this case, we're not using the entire page in REPL. We are just using this page. So you can think about it like Inception. It's a page within a page. And so when this popped up, it's showing me this actual page. And obviously you can see there's nothing behind it. There's nothing for it to display. Normally, if I wanted to see, what was behind the actual page from a scripting perspective, it would show me the files that were inherent. But right now we don't really have a file with data in it other than script.js, and it's not really showing anything. So if I came in here and I said console log, which is another way I can display data, right? I can display data in the page using console log, and I run it, it won't show up back here because unfortunately the page within a page is not being displayed. Now, there's probably a way that I can get this out, but I really haven't figured that out yet. Let me see one thing. Maybe I'm not looking at the right thing. REPL.com, service worker. Yeah. So right now, and don't worry about the errors. Sometimes the errors are there to give you context. Sometimes they're to tell you what's wrong. When I do console.log, the actual message that I'm looking for should display down here in this part of the in this part of the actual page. It is not, so this is useless to me. But if you were actually developing in a page itself, you would be able to see this down here work to your specification. Because we're using REPL, I don't think this gives me a console view. And I'm looking right now. Oh, there it is. Ha! It is giving me console view. So here we go. This is the console view that I was looking for in the page, right? So right now, console.log, it gave me the same issue. It said, function values. But here's a funny thing. If I came into the console and I said document.fonts.values, and I said execute, gave me the same thing. What if I said, I'm just doing this for, posterity's sake, if I wanted to see where the actual page exists inside my file directory. So your website is really just a directory of files. It's a folder structure, right? And so if I said document.uri, it should tell me where this is. Ah, there it is. And that's actually the URL that we were getting when we did the alert, right? So console.log is another way that you can actually see the data as it's passing through your page, or if you wanted to do things like pause the page. I'm wondering one more thing. That's a good point. If I wanted to pause the page in its load, I don't think I can. But either way, this is really good information. And as you see there, it spit me out the document.uri. And there's so many other different things that you can look for through the document. Just understand, we use the document for very few things. We use the document to see what browser type we're using. So if I wanted to see, and not all document dot will give you the, exactly what you're looking for. But if I said document dot and I'm looking for it right now, I don't see it off the top of my mind, or I don't see it right now. But there's a way you can see, I think it's called document.navigator, or navigator is actually a part of the document object model, or it's a part of the actual components of the page. I shouldn't say document object model. It's part of the components of the page. And I should be able to see the navigator. The navigator will show me what browser I'm in. But either way, I wanted to stop and really talk about the document object model from the perspective high level. Because as this class progresses, we're going to be manipulating the document object model exclusively. And I'm going to be using the word document object model a lot. And I want you to understand what that actually means and why. The document object model is the document. The document is the HTML page. And that's the page we're modifying in this class. And as you go forward using JavaScript. Well, I hope this was informative, and I look forward to you continuing my course. Like I say in all of my videos, good luck, have fun, ciao.